Sherry Irely entered the world on December 6, 1963 in Salem, Oregon. She was an only child, yet she grew up among a large extended family, and everyone remained extremely close. From childhood, Sherry had a reputation for being warm and cheerful. Her friends knew they could depend on her whenever they needed help, and she was consistently there for those she loved. By the time she finished high school, Sherry still had no clear idea what she wanted to pursue in life. Rather than enrolling in college immediately, she chose to spend some time away from school and make her own money, so she would not need to depend on her parents financially. She and a cousin rented an apartment together to cut costs, and Sherry got work delivering pizzas for Domino's. Her family, however, was far from pleased with her choice. The position required her to drive alone throughout the city, occasionally well into the night, bringing orders to strangers. It was also the early 1980s, when nearly everyone continued paying with cash, making delivery workers particularly vulnerable to robbery. Sherry was quite petite as well. She had only recently turned 18, was roughly 5'2", and weighed about 100 pounds. Given all of these circumstances, her family feared for her safety. Still, Sherry wanted the position, and even with their worries, she chose to accept it without changing her mind. Several weeks afterward, on July 4, 1982, Sherry received a call from her supervisor, who was calling from the restaurant that evening to ask for help. She had been scheduled to have the day off, but it was Independence Day, and the restaurant was having trouble handling the flood of orders coming in. They needed more delivery drivers, so her supervisor asked whether she could work the evening shift, and Sherry said yes. She was determined to put aside as much money as possible, so she was usually glad to accept an additional shift whenever one opened up, because the holiday rush had become difficult to manage, and she did not want to turn down an opportunity to earn even when it meant changing her plans at the minute. At about 9:30 that evening, Sherry departed the restaurant carrying 3 pizzas for delivery. Although the hour was growing late, people throughout Salem were still celebrating the 4th of July, launching fireworks and enjoying the holiday. Roughly 30 minutes later, a local priest was traveling along a narrow road through a quiet, secluded area on the city's outskirts when he spotted a Domino's delivery vehicle stopped along the roadside. The driver's door stood completely open, the motor remained running, and several pizza boxes were scattered on the ground beside the vehicle. Shortly afterward, another man pulled over while heading home after watching fireworks with his children. He knew Sherry's family quite well and knew she worked for Domino's, making the discovery even more troubling. No driver could be seen anywhere nearby, so the 2 men went to the closest telephone and contacted police to tell them what they had discovered. When officers reached the location, they immediately realized something was not right. The vehicle had been abandoned in the roadway, while pizza boxes lay spread across the nearby ground, quickly suggesting that the person making the delivery might have been assaulted or abducted. It seemed the driver had gotten out, removed the pizzas, and then something unforeseen had occurred almost at once. No home stood anywhere near that portion of the road at the time, making the circumstances even more suspicious. Officers additionally observed that the vehicle's engine and headlights remained switched on, while the parking brake was engaged. The scene suggested that the driver had expected to remain outside the vehicle for merely a few seconds. This caused investigators to consider whether the person responsible had been hiding somewhere beside the road or had come there in another vehicle. Soon, officers located several tire tracks around the scene, including one that passed straight over a pizza lying on the pavement. Someone had apparently driven across the box, prompting investigators to question whether that vehicle belonged to the person behind the attack. Another pizza had been crushed open, with a distinct boot print visible on it, strengthening the possibility that some sort of struggle had taken place. Police also located a Domino's employee hat near the vehicle, and several yards away, they found a name tag bearing the name Sherry. There were no clear indications of a violent confrontation, such as blood, but crime scene investigators did spot one strange detail. Initially, another collection of tire tracks seemed to be visible in the dirt beside the vehicle. Looking more closely, however, investigators determined that the marks had actually been left by the soles of someone's boots scraping across the ground. By then, police had developed a fairly strong idea of what could have occurred along that road. Investigators believed the Domino's driver had reached the secluded area, carrying 3 pizzas, when at some point, another person pulled alongside her and pretended to be the customer who had ordered them. Sherry then engaged the parking brake, stepped from the vehicle, and removed the pizzas, which investigators believed was when the assault occurred. From the drag marks along the roadway, police theorized that the attacker had either knocked Sherry unconscious or simply pulled her toward another vehicle before leaving with her. Officers contacted the Domino's restaurant, and management verified that Sherry had been driving the abandoned vehicle. Detectives next interviewed the employee, who had accepted her final delivery order, and that discussion revealed several significant new details. The employee who answered the call said the customer was a man who sounded as though he was likely in his 30s or 40s. He ordered 3 large pizzas with extra toppings, then supplied an address, telephone number, and name. He also requested that a particular female delivery driver bring the order. That driver had taken the day off, however, which was ultimately why the restaurant had called Sherry to cover the additional shift. The employee explained that the woman he requested wasn't working that evening, but the man proceeded with the order anyway, and Sherry was given the delivery. Police soon established that no houses existed at the address he had supplied. At the time, that section of Salem was scarcely developed, meaning that when Sherry arrived, she would have seen only a country road bordered by brush and undeveloped land. The telephone number supplied by the caller belonged to a motel fairly close to where Sherry's vehicle was discovered, while the name he provided seemed entirely fictitious. Investigators began wondering whether the order had been made either from the motel itself or a nearby payphone. They visited the motel and examined its guests, but found nobody who seemed connected to Sherry's disappearance. Crime scene technicians likewise attempted to lift fingerprints from the payphone, but that effort produced nothing either. The boot impression and tire track discovered across the scattered pizzas offered little more assistance. Investigators couldn't obtain any usable impressions from either clue, leaving them with minimal evidentiary value. Police hoped these combined clues would eventually point them toward a specific suspect, but each promising lead seemed to disappear under closer examination. Despite the extensive effort, investigators still had no explanation for where Sherry had gone or who was responsible, leaving them with little direction as the search continued. By then, detectives were dealing with a challenging situation. An 18-year-old woman had apparently disappeared from a remote section of roadway, leaving almost no evidence indicating where she had been taken or who had abducted her. Police mounted a widespread search, dispatching teams to cover several miles surrounding the location where Sherry's vehicle had been discovered, including nearby woods and the river. Meanwhile, they appealed to anyone who had been in that vicinity that night to report anything they might have witnessed. Soon enough, several witnesses came forward with information that appeared potentially helpful. Since it was the 4th of July, many people had been driving around Salem that evening, including around the location where Sherry's vehicle was found. Eventually, multiple unrelated witnesses reported seeing 2 vehicles that drew investigators' interest. One was a dark-colored Chevrolet Monte Carlo, and the other was an older bright green pickup truck. Police attempted to determine who owned each vehicle, but none of those efforts produced a breakthrough. Before long, investigators were left with almost no reliable leads. The only option available was to keep widening the search. Word of Sherry's disappearance moved rapidly through Salem, and many volunteers joined the effort. Her extended relatives, family friends, and total strangers from the community spent hours searching mile after mile of the surrounding area. Yet nobody discovered any trace of her. The day following Sherry's disappearance, Domino's received a disturbing phone call. A man claimed that he had Sherry and demanded a ransom for her return. But he provided no details and offered no proof that she was actually with him or even still alive. He never called again, and police were unable to trace the call or obtain any useful information from it, leaving investigators facing yet another dead end. Over the next several days, the search operation gradually began to scale back. Police simply couldn't continue dedicating that many resources indefinitely without finding anything. Even so, they kept asking the public to come forward with anything they might know or remember. Before long, one of those tips caught their attention. A few days after police released descriptions of the 2 vehicles witnesses had reported seeing near the area where Sherry disappeared, someone contacted investigators about the bright green pickup truck. According to the tipster, a man named Daryl Wilson owned a truck that looked very similar. When officers went to speak with him, they immediately noticed something suspicious. Wilson's pickup was now brown, and the paint looked extremely fresh. He was brought in for questioning and admitted that the truck had previously been light green, but he had repainted it shortly after the vehicle description appeared in the news. Wilson insisted that the timing was nothing more than a coincidence. He said he had already been planning to change the color and that it had nothing to do with Sherry's disappearance. He also initially claimed that he had never met her, although he later changed that story and said he had seen her once at some party. Investigators began looking for any possible connection between Wilson and Sherry, and they soon learned that his fiancée worked with Sherry's mother. But another detail made the situation even stranger. Wilson's fiancée had a 9-year-old sister who had vanished without a trace just 3 weeks after Sherry disappeared, only a short time before investigators first began looking into Wilson. So, while neither connection was particularly strong, police now had one man who appeared to be linked in some way to 2 separate disappearances. Wilson was brought in for questioning several times and answered the detectives' questions. But when they asked him to take a polygraph test, he refused. He also claimed to have an alibi for the night Sherry disappeared. According to Wilson, he had gone camping with friends at a lake outside the city, and the group had spent the night there together. His friends confirmed that Wilson had arrived at the lake with them. There was just one problem. No one could account for where he was between about 6:30 that evening and 3:30 the following morning. Sherry had disappeared right in the middle of that window, and the drive from the lake back to Salem took less than an hour. That made investigators even more suspicious that Wilson could have been involved. Police obtained search warrants for his home and truck, and while crime scene technicians looked for anything that might connect him to Sherry, the case took a very unusual turn. Sherry's parents still held out hope that their daughter might be found alive, and at some point they reached out to a Texas psychic named John Catchings, who had already worked with law enforcement before. Catchings later said that he had experienced this vision even before Sherry's parents reached out to him, and that it came to him without any prior contact from the family. He said he awoke during the night and saw the spirit of a young woman standing beside his bed. Soon afterward, images of a house and a man began appearing to him. After carefully examining the available details from Sherry's case, Catchings claimed the young woman from his vision was Sherry and that she was already dead. He eventually traveled to Oregon, where local police showed him Sherry's car and then took him directly to Wilson's house. Catchings immediately identified it as the same house from his vision, then accused Wilson of being responsible for Sherry's murder. He also explained what he thought had occurred during the abduction, and several details in his account closely resembled the theory investigators had already formed from the evidence found at the scene. Still, despite the intense suspicion surrounding Wilson, the searches themselves turned up absolutely nothing. Crime scene technicians found no evidence inside his truck indicating Sherry had ever been there, while the search of his house was equally fruitless. Police brought Wilson back for another interrogation, hoping he might change his account, contradict himself, or perhaps confess. Instead, however, the investigation took another startling turn. Only hours after investigators released him, Wilson was discovered dead inside his home, and it soon became apparent that he had killed himself. He left behind no note, and considering everything that had occurred, detectives regarded the timing as highly suspicious. They kept searching for anything that might directly tie Wilson to Sherry's disappearance. Yet, despite their efforts, they never located it. During the following several months, detectives continued pursuing fresh tips and following up on information, but by then they had little doubt Wilson had been involved. As a result, most of their work centered on locating Sherry's body. They never found it, however, and without additional evidence, the investigation eventually went cold. In 2005, 23 years after Sherry vanished, the local police department established a cold case unit, and hers was among the first cases they chose to revisit. Detectives started reviewing files left by the original investigators and quickly recognized how firmly everyone had believed Wilson was responsible. However, the new team did not want to depend solely on conclusions formed decades earlier, so they chose to reconsider other possible suspects. While examining the old files, detectives learned about a series of murders committed in Salem during the mid-1980s and began wondering whether the same man might also have been behind Sherry's disappearance. The first killing occurred on February 19, 1984, nearly 2 years after Sherry vanished. A 21-year-old woman named Rebecca Darlene disappeared from the store where she was working a night shift. Her belongings remained behind at the store, and police had almost no evidence or useful information to pursue. It was not until a month later that Rebecca's body was discovered in a river roughly 6 miles outside Salem. Her hands were bound, and investigators concluded that she had been strangled, but they still could not identify her murderer or determine who had killed her. Only a few weeks later, another young woman vanished in similar circumstances. 18-year-old college student Catherine Redmond had driven away from a party at around 2:00 in the morning. But sometime afterward, her vehicle was discovered abandoned in the middle of a road. 4 days later, her body was found not far from where Rebecca had been discovered earlier, causing police to believe the two killings were connected. This time, the investigation soon directed police toward 25-year-old William Scott Smith. Several tips implicated him, including witness reports from people who had seen a Pontiac near Catherine's abandoned car. Smith owned a very similar vehicle, giving detectives even more reason to examine him far more closely. Then, just when the investigation seemed to have few answers, a tow truck driver contacted police and supplied another significant detail altogether. Smith told investigators that he had called him during the night after his Pontiac wound up in a ditch, and the incident had occurred close to the same area where Catherine's car was discovered. Although none of this established that Smith had committed either killing, detectives soon uncovered additional reasons to examine him more closely. He already had a significant criminal record involving harassment, threats, and stalking. Investigators further learned that roughly a month before Rebecca's murder, Smith had repeatedly phoned a 20-year-old Salem woman and threatened to kill her and sexually assault her. Eventually, she reported him to police and Smith was arrested. He did not dispute the allegations and was eventually sentenced to 180 days in jail. Because Smith was already incarcerated, detectives handling Rebecca and Catherine's murders chose to interview him there. They encouraged him to confess if he was responsible, explaining that telling the truth could give him a chance to clear his conscience. But Smith continued insisting that he had nothing to do with either killing. Later, however, his parents visited him and told investigators that if he truly was involved, he needed to admit the truth. Surprisingly, following that conversation, Smith reconsidered and agreed to a deal with prosecutors. In return for having some extra charges connected to several thefts dismissed, he admitted responsibility for both murders. He went on to recount each killing with such precise details that investigators had little remaining doubt about his guilt. A judge eventually sentenced him to 2 life terms, with no possibility of parole for at least 20 years. Cold case detectives later discovered that after Smith's arrest, police had actually investigated whether he might have played a role in Sherry's disappearance. At that point, though, he had offered an alibi. Smith was employed as a truck driver, and he said that on the night Sherry was abducted, he had been working a long distance away from Salem. Investigators ultimately accepted that information and eliminated him as a suspect. More than 2 decades afterward, however, the cold case team started questioning how reliable that alibi truly was. They investigated further and, surprisingly, uncovered a record indicating that Smith had been pulled over by a patrol officer in Silverton, a town only a short drive from Salem. The traffic stop occurred on the exact night Sherry vanished, showing that Smith had actually been close enough to carry out the crime. Detectives searched for physical evidence supporting their suspicions, but after all those years, they found nothing useful. Instead, they chose to visit Smith behind bars, and their initial interview with him occurred in late 2006. Smith denied murdering Sherry, yet investigators felt his denials were far from convincing. Based on how he answered their questions, they left with the feeling that he might be nearing the point of finally revealing what had happened. Detectives also understood that although Smith was technically eligible for parole eventually, his chances of ever being released before old age were extremely small. They therefore decided to make him an offer. If he revealed the truth about Sherry and explained precisely what had happened to her, they would arrange to have him moved to a more comfortable prison. Although Smith had confessed to 2 murders years before, detectives did not have much confidence that he would accept the proposal. To their surprise, though, he agreed. Smith confessed that he had participated in Sherry's abduction and murder, but insisted that he had not acted alone. According to Smith, another man had taken part, someone named Roger. Smith explained that Sherry had never actually been the person they intended to target. He and Roger had previously noticed another woman who delivered for the same Domino's and had originally planned to abduct her and demand a ransom. They had selected a remote section of road and created a false address that would bring her there. Once everything was prepared, they put their scheme into action. Roger phoned the restaurant and ordered the pizzas. He then specifically requested that the particular employee make the delivery. When he learned she had taken the day off, he and Smith were disappointed, but chose to continue with the plan anyway. The pair drove to the secluded roadway in Smith's vehicle and waited there. When Sherry arrived, one of them flagged her down and claimed to be the customer who had placed the order. Sherry stopped, stepped outside, and removed the pizza boxes from her car. That was when Roger seized her and forced her inside the vehicle. They then drove Sherry toward the river. Smith never said whether she had been sexually assaulted, but he admitted that at some point they abandoned their initial plan to keep her alive for ransom. Instead, Smith strangled her and threw her body into the same river where Rebecca Darlin and Catherine Redmond would later be discovered. Smith gave detectives information that had never been made public. He knew the name of the Domino's employee they had originally requested, and even recalled the additional toppings they had ordered on the pizzas. Details such as these gave investigators little reason to doubt his account, meaning that after 24 years, they finally knew what had happened to Sherry and who was responsible. There was only one major problem involving Roger. By the time Smith confessed, his accomplice had already died from cancer several years earlier. As a result, he could never be brought to justice. Even so, detectives finally understood what had happened to Sherry. However, the investigation also revealed that their predecessors had overlooked the suspect who, in hindsight, warranted far greater scrutiny. The biggest reason was not even the alibi Smith had provided. Investigators at the time had simply become so certain that Darrell Wilson was responsible that they concentrated almost exclusively on him and failed to seriously examine other possibilities. Ultimately, Wilson had absolutely nothing to do with Sherry's murder. Smith ultimately received a third life sentence, but his story was far from over. 6 years after his confession in 2012, a detective who had since retired was carefully reviewing recordings and reports from Smith's interviews when he noticed something strange and unexpected in the material he was reviewing. From time to time, Smith appeared to mention specific details tied to another unsolved case without ever openly admitting that he was responsible. That case involved 21-year-old Terry Monroe, who vanished after spending an evening with her friends at a bar. Her disappearance dated back to 1981, one full year before Sherry was killed. The retired detective relayed this information to police, and when investigators returned to question Smith, it didn't take him very long to confess. He admitted abducting Terry near the bar, taking her to a river, killing her, and leaving her body there. Just as in his earlier confessions, Smith supplied several specific details that investigators believed only the murderer could have known. Smith eventually received a fourth life sentence, yet detectives still weren't certain they had found every victim. They knew he had stalked other women and seemed to rely on a specific method when approaching them, particularly on quiet roads. On secluded roads, he would gently strike his car against a woman's vehicle, pull over, and attempt to persuade her to step outside so they could examine the damage. Police interviewed several women who said Smith had attempted the same tactic with them, but they grew suspicious, kept their doors locked, and drove away. This caused investigators to question whether there might have been other women who failed to escape, and whether Smith could have committed further crimes that had never been connected to him. Today, Smith is 67 years old and remains incarcerated with no realistic prospect of ever being released from prison for the rest of his life. Regarding Sherry, her case is now considered solved, although she remains officially listed as a missing person. Investigators searched the river where Smith claimed he had left her, even draining part of it, but after so many years, they could not locate any trace whatsoever of her remains. Finally, there is another detail concerning Darrell Wilson that is worth noting. As mentioned earlier, only a few weeks after Sherry vanished, 9-year-old Danielle Good, the younger sister of a woman linked to Wilson, disappeared from her home. Wilson was found dead just 3 weeks afterward, only hours after police questioned him again about Sherry. No evidence has ever established that Wilson was involved in Danielle's disappearance. But now that we know he had nothing to do with Sherry's murder, it's difficult not to wonder whether Wilson's death soon afterward might instead have been connected to Danielle's case. Sadly, even more than 4 decades later, nobody knows for certain what truly happened to Danielle, or where her disappearance ultimately led, or what became of her afterward there. February 17, 2017, New South Wales, Australia. Padstow, a peaceful Sydney suburb roughly 16 miles southwest of the central business district. Later that evening, the quiet on Watson Road is shattered by approaching sirens. Police vehicles and multiple ambulances hurry toward a private home after dispatchers receive reports of a violent physical altercation and a serious knife-related injury. The first paramedics arriving discover a 29-year-old man lying on the pavement beside the house entrance. His state is critical. A deep cut has opened his neck, and he is rapidly losing a large quantity of blood, including blood coming from his mouth. The medical crew quickly brings out their emergency gear outside the residence. They focus on stopping the hemorrhaging, stabilizing the injured area, and preparing him for urgent transfer to the closest surgical unit. Only a few feet away, a young woman remains standing. She appears intensely distressed, yelling toward the paramedics and pleading with them to hurry. Meanwhile, patrol officers start examining the nearby property and soon locate another individual linked to the events of that night. He is a resident from the area, and his presence immediately prompts questions. The man's face is seriously and badly wounded after the attack. Officers can plainly see fresh bruises matching powerful blows, several marks across his face, and most strikingly, multiple torn wounds that seem consistent with forceful human bites. While investigators inspect the front of the property, they spot another detail. The entrance door has been broken open and the locking system is severely damaged. Now, consider what emergency crews are facing at this moment, right outside the house. 3 people are standing outside the same house, yet nothing about the scene appears to make logical sense. One man is losing blood quickly after suffering a knife wound. Another has been brutally beaten with bare hands and bitten. The third person is frantic and pleading with paramedics to save the first man. Behind them all stands a door that apparently has been forced open. Before we begin assembling this complicated timeline piece by piece, take a moment to make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a like on this video. Your support lets me spend the time examining court records and building detailed, fact-based breakdowns like this one. Done? Excellent. Let's continue with the timeline from here without further delay. Despite all the efforts made by paramedics on Watson Road, they are unable to save the 29-year-old man. The injuries to his neck are far too severe, with vital arteries damaged. He dies at the scene without ever regaining consciousness. Eventually, the medical team is forced to end their efforts, formally confirm his death, and cover the area from public view. From that point onward, the property becomes an active crime scene connected to a fatal incident. Police place yellow crime scene tape around the area and shut down traffic completely along the street. Under standard safety procedures, officers enter the house to ensure no other armed people are inside. There they find 2 additional women. They are neighbors of the woman who has been arrested. Both are visibly shaken by what they have just seen, and they quickly become important witnesses in the investigation. Police tell both women to stay exactly where they are. Meanwhile, outside the property, the injured local man is separated from the others and handed over to paramedics for urgent medical care. The patrol officers then turn their attention toward the woman who had been yelling at the scene. She makes no effort to vanish into the darkness or flee the area. Officers read her rights, record the blood visible on her clothes, and put her in handcuffs. She is placed inside a patrol car and transported to the nearest police station for an initial interview. Investigators need to establish precisely how the confrontation outside the house unfolded. During formal questioning, the young woman gives a statement that becomes the basis of the initial police report. Her words are recorded as, "I stepped in to help, and I stabbed him. I stabbed him." That statement immediately creates a problem for detectives. Who exactly was she attempting to protect when she intervened with a knife? How did one man become badly beaten while another sustained a devastating neck injury outside the same house? And which of these 3 people was actually the aggressor? To answer those questions and reconstruct what truly happened that night, we have to leave Sydney in 2017 behind. To understand what brought that confrontation to the broken door, we need to travel several years backward and move to another continent, County Wexford, Republic of Ireland. This is where the story of the man who would eventually die from that severe neck injury begins. His name was David Walsh. Back home, David worked in construction as a professional carpenter and was the father of 4 sons and daughters. In 2013, however, the life he had established in Ireland suddenly came to an end. David promptly purchased a ticket for a long-distance flight and departed for Australia. Police records reveal the reason behind such an unexpected move halfway across the world. David was dealing with several serious criminal charges. Official documents state that the allegations involved physically attacking his former girlfriend, a separate assault involving another local man, and, most importantly, using force against 3 members of the Irish police. Rather than wait for the matter to proceed through the courts, David left his family behind and escaped to the opposite side of the world, placing himself outside the immediate reach of Irish authorities. After arriving in Australia, he secured steady employment on construction sites. That same year, 27-year-old Irish woman Tina Cahill likewise relocated to Australia. Unlike David, Tina had no prior history in police records. She secured a visa and legally obtained employment with a Sydney company that specialized in traffic management. This brings us to one of those geographic details that always catches my attention in cases like this. Tina was from New Ross. David came from Enniscorthy. The 2 towns sit in the same region of Ireland, and the drive between them takes approximately half an hour. In effect, they had grown up as neighbors. Yet, while they were still in Ireland, their lives had never intersected. They shared no friends, had never encountered each other, and neither even knew the other existed. Their first meeting finally occurred in 2014, more than 9,000 miles away from the towns where they had grown up. They met at a pub in Bondi Junction, a busy Sydney district. David and Tina happened to be in the same place while out for the night. As 2 Irish expats sharing the same cultural background, they soon discovered plenty to discuss. A simple conversation at the bar quickly turned into a serious relationship. Soon afterward, they chose to live together and started renting rooms in the same house that investigators would later treat as a crime scene. 2 of Tina's friends moved into the property as well, transforming the residence into a shared rental occupied by the couple and their roommates. Looking at their digital footprint from that time, everything seems entirely ordinary. Their social media accounts contain photographs of the pair together during trips and relaxed days out. That public image reaches its high point on December 31st, 2016. On New Year's Eve, Tina and David formally announce that they are engaged. In the pictures they share, both appear genuinely happy. Tina proudly displays her engagement ring. They smile straight into the camera, while hundreds of congratulatory comments come in from relatives back home in Ireland. From an outside perspective, it appears that 2 Irish expats, despite the difficulties surrounding David's past, have succeeded in creating a happy life together. But when those photographs are compared with the case records, one question immediately stands out. How can a couple publicly planning a wedding become involved in a fatal incident just 5 weeks after their engagement? How can those broad smiles in their photographs eventually become handcuffs and yellow police tape? To discover what truly occurred between those 2 points, we need to look past what they presented online. Behind those carefully chosen posts, the reality was completely different. The cheerful updates gradually gave way to court orders, as neighbors increasingly heard shouting and the sounds of physical altercations coming from inside the property. To see what life was actually like inside the Watson Road home, we have to return to 2015. By then, police patrols were becoming frequent visitors at the address. Neighbors repeatedly called emergency services over continuing arguments, breaking glass, and furniture being damaged inside the house. Records from this period portray a relationship dominated by ongoing mutual control. Witnesses said David grew intensely possessive, and his behavior soon progressed into physical aggression. That shift in behavior would become increasingly important as the relationship continued, and police were called to the property with growing regularity. During this period, and afterward as well, David was prepared to punch almost any man who happened to look at Tina for too long. Those explosive episodes repeatedly unfolded inside their shared home, behind closed doors. During one dispute, he utterly ruined a brand new television after throwing a heavy glass bottle straight into its screen. Tina, however, later gave investigators an account of conduct that was much less obvious and considerably more troubling. In statements recorded as part of the case, she reported repeated intimate encounters that she had not consented to. Tina alleged that David pressured and forced physical contact on her, at times exploiting moments when she was completely sound asleep. Pause for a moment and consider the dynamic between them. In most criminal cases, we generally expect a fairly obvious separation between the aggressor and the person being victimized. Here, though, that recognizable pattern begins to collapse. The violence is not traveling in just one direction anymore. Instead, their relationship turns into a routine cycle where each person is physically hurting the other. In September 2015, Australian authorities finally step in and issue Tina a protective order. It is a legally enforceable order forbidding aggressive conduct of any kind. Yet having a court order written on paper does little to prevent the circumstances from becoming worse. On October 3, Isabel Jennings, staying in a room nearby, hears another heated dispute and walks into the hallway to find out what is happening. Upstairs, she discovers David already badly hurt. He is seated on a couch with both hands covering his head. At that exact point, Tina slowly and gradually comes up the stairs. Her right hand is held tightly behind her back. When she reaches the couch, Tina abruptly leans toward David and hits him 3 or 4 times in quick succession around the head. Isabel later tells the court that, initially, she believes Tina is merely striking him with her fist. Several long seconds pass before she realizes Tina is actually carrying a knife. Remarkably, despite the severity of that assault and the blood he had lost, David firmly refuses to contact police. He maintains that Tina had never meant to seriously hurt him. For only so long, they could conceal the consequences of these clashes from authorities. By November that year, another major incident occurs. Again, Isabel rushes in after hearing dishes shatter and discovers David crying, with a deep gash running across his forehead. The case records explain precisely what caused his injury. During a dispute, David hurled a heavy glass candle holder at Tina. With her back facing him, she instantly grabbed it and violently tossed it over her shoulder, hitting David in the head and leaving a serious injury. This incident finally results in criminal charges and a court proceeding. Because she threw the candle holder, Tina is formally convicted of recklessly causing injury. Under her sentence, the court requires her to complete a compulsory rehabilitation program lasting several weeks, specifically intended for people with a history of aggressive conduct within relationships. There is also another significant development. This time, David receives a protective order of his own against Tina. We now have 2 people holding active protective orders against one another. Both have wielded knives, heavy objects from the household, and their fists in confrontations. Both have repeatedly suffered serious injuries during these violent confrontations. These are also the same 2 people who, slightly more than a year later, will upload those cheerful engagement photos online. So what, precisely, set off the final burst of violence on that February night? And how did a completely uninvolved local man end up severely beaten outside their home? To follow the sequence of events that ultimately resulted in the emergency services call, we have to return several hours earlier. Late on February 16th, the evening slowly gives way to the early morning hours of February 17th. Tina, David, and their 2 roommates leave their neighborhood to spend the night at several bars. Investigators later piece together their movements around Sydney almost exactly minute by minute. The 4 initially arrive at the pub inside the Grand Hotel. After drinking there for a while, they decide to continue elsewhere and take a cab to the bar at the Doncaster Hotel. That is where another dispute erupts between Tina and David after they have been drinking. The confrontation eventually causes everyone to separate. David walks out of the bar alone, while Tina and the other women stay behind. Yet David does not return directly home. Instead, he visits a 3rd place that night, the Coach and Horses Hotel. Only after drinking more alcohol there does he finally get a ride back to Watson Road. When David reaches the front porch, he encounters a basic problem. He has no keys. Rather than search for another way inside, he resorts to force and kicks the front door open. This is the same damaged lock investigators will later inspect carefully with flashlights while processing the scene. After entering the completely vacant house, David does not go upstairs to the bedroom. He merely stretches out on the couch in the downstairs living room and falls asleep. Meanwhile, Tina and the other women keep their night out going in the city. At a nearby table, they encounter a local man named Matthew Hyde. He has absolutely nothing to do with any of the couple's earlier disputes. As they converse, Matthew becomes interested in one of Tina's friends, a woman named Grace. When the bars start closing for the night, the women choose to return home and ask their new acquaintance to come along. Matthew agrees, hoping to spend additional time with Grace. When you look at everyone's movements that night, one detail about what occurs once they reach the house really stands out to me. Think about that. They arrive home during the middle of the night and discover the front door severely damaged, with the lock completely broken. What would most people do under those circumstances? They would immediately call the police, believing someone had broken into the house. Yet this group merely steps over the damage and enters, None of them connects the clues, or considers that the broken door may not be evidence of an outside intruder whatsoever. It is actually the consequence of David's earlier outburst after they left him on the opposite side of the city. Tina, Grace, their third friend, and Matthew proceed down the hallway. They make no attempt to remain quiet, speaking loudly and laughing as they come inside. Their voices travel throughout the entire first floor. The noise immediately awakens David on the couch. He opens his eyes, rises, and concentrates on the people who have just entered the house. And the first thing he notices in his own living room is a man he has never met standing beside Tina. What follows makes no sense under any normal standard of behavior. David does not even attempt to discover who the man is or why the women brought him home. He wakes, sees a total stranger standing only a few feet from Tina, and reacts immediately. "Who the hell are you?" he yells as he rushes forward. David delivers a powerful blow to Matthew from behind, instantly throwing him off balance and sending him onto the living room floor. From there, the confrontation becomes entirely chaotic. David climbs on top of Matthew, repeatedly punching him with his fists. He grips Matthew tightly by the hair and violently drives his face against the floor. During the struggle, David even uses his teeth, biting the man across the face. That is how Matthew suffers the deep injuries officers will later observe when they arrive at the house. Injuries strange enough to immediately prompt questions about exactly what had occurred inside that living room. Trying to restrain a large man showing that degree of aggression proves physically challenging. Tina immediately rushes into the fight to help Matthew as the violent struggle continues, unfolding directly in front of her at that moment. She seizes David by the arm, attempting to drag him back, and begins yelling at him. She repeatedly tries to make one basic point clear. This man returned home with Grace. He has absolutely nothing to do with Tina. David, however, refuses to listen. Without looking back, he violently swings his arm behind him. The force of the blow is enough to knock Tina from her feet and throw her onto the floor. She quickly rises and moves back into the struggle. This time, Tina fights back physically. She steps directly toward David and punches him squarely in the face. David reacts by shoving her away hard and lifting his fist as though he is about to hit her in return. Grace then joins the struggle, grabbing David and attempting to pull him away from Matthew, who is already visibly hurt. Realizing that they cannot end the assault with their bare hands, Tina makes a choice that will forever alter the lives of everyone inside that room. She turns around and hurries into the kitchen. Opening the utensil drawer, Tina searches inside, then removes a large knife. The women watching the struggle notice the weapon in her hand and panic. They plead with Tina to settle down and avoid doing something she cannot undo. Yet investigators later record the precise words she speaks at that moment. "No, he needs to be taught a lesson. It's not fair. Look at poor Matthew." After saying this, Tina heads toward David again, with Matthew still pinned beneath him on the floor. She makes a single swift movement with the knife toward David's neck. Moments later, she withdraws the knife and simply lets it fall onto the floor. The struggle ends nearly as quickly as it began. David lets Matthew go. The wound has struck vital arteries, and David rapidly starts losing his strength. Then comes one of the strangest details from the entire night, something patrol officers later record in their reports. One witness, visibly stunned, inexplicably gives the wounded David a mug of tea. Almost instinctively, he accepts it from her. A few seconds later, David manages to say, "Call an ambulance." He turns around, walks through the damaged front door, and heads onto the lawn before collapsing heavily onto the pavement. One element of this story stands out to me. It is how rapidly the situation closes around everyone involved. Hardly any time passes from when the group steps across that broken door lock to when David collapses outside. At this point, the scene emergency crews discovered on the lawn finally becomes understandable. We can see why one man suffers severe bite wounds, why another lies outside with no strength remaining, and why a third individual stands nearby wearing handcuffs. What remains now is the last stage of this case, the trial, when the results of the medical examinations will become a crucial part of what happens next. In October 2018, Tina Cahill stands before the Supreme Court in a formal courtroom appearance. Prosecutors at first accuse her of deliberately taking David's life. Matthew Hyde bears no responsibility and remains connected to the case only as the injured witness. Yet before the primary proceedings can formally get underway, the case undergoes a significant legal shift. The defense submits findings from an independent psychiatric assessment to the court in full. Doctors officially diagnose Tina with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and major depression, conditions they link to years of recurring physical abuse throughout the relationship. On the strength of those medical findings, the judge permits proceedings to continue under the lesser offense of manslaughter. The trial itself then develops into a fierce confrontation between both sides as proceedings unfold. David's family also demands the harshest sentence available. His former wife openly claims that the post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis is merely a convenient justification. David's brother additionally tells the court their father could not endure losing his son and died from grief 10 months afterward. In response, the defense produces cards where David had apologized for physically harming Tina and vowed that he would change. They further introduce testimony from Tina's previous partners, who verify that she had never displayed aggressive conduct during her earlier relationships. Having considered the evidence, the court acknowledges that aggression occurred on both sides within the relationship, and that Tina never initially meant to take David's life. The eventual punishment is now 8 years imprisonment, with parole possible after 5 years. In the end, whenever I examine cases like this, I return to one question: why do people stay inside relationships this destructive until turning back is no longer possible? This case offers a grim illustration of what may happen when a harmful relationship continues for far too long over many months, ultimately touching multiple lives simultaneously. After completing the minimum part of her sentence, Tina is released in February 2022. Australian authorities promptly deport her without delay to Ireland, back to the place where this complicated story began. A man carrying 16 wounds in his skull rose from bed and switched on the coffee maker. He prepared a lunch. He filled out a check and placed it on the counter. He went outside for the morning newspaper, and when the door clicked shut behind him, he took the spare key from the flower pot and let himself inside, as he had countless times before, in the same familiar way he always had, without hesitation, following the ordinary sequence that had become part of his daily life at home for many years. Part of his jaw had disappeared. The blade had pierced bone and entered the tissue beneath, reaching the precise area that would have told him he was dying. So Peter Porco did the only thing still within his reach, his routine. And about 230 meters west, the person responsible was already back on the thruway, heading toward campus before sunrise. Delmare, New York, is a hamlet within the town of Bethlehem, roughly 5 miles south of downtown Albany. It is not a place known for notoriety. Split levels and colonials, mature maples, driveways sporting basketball hoops. A high school people move into the district for the sort of address that appears in real estate listings as quiet, established, family-oriented. In 2004, the most common recurring entry on the Bethlehem police blotter involved teenagers loitering outside convenience stores. 36 Broccoli Drive was one such house, 2 stories, attached garage, a little front step with a flower pot beside it. Peter R. Porco was 52 years old. He was born in Norwalk, Connecticut, the son of Jane and Ralph Porco, and he established his career in Albany the slow way. University at Albany, followed by Albany Law School, then a position most law students avoid, assistant public defender for Albany County. He later entered private practice at a downtown firm, but the work he discussed with greatest pride was the least glamorous. He served as a law guardian in the 3rd Department, meaning he appeared in Albany County Family Court, and represented children who had nobody else in the room speaking for them. Custody disputes, neglect petitions, situations where the adults were the problem. He eventually clerked for Justice William McDermott, and by 2004 occupied one of the most respected non-judicial positions in the state court system, law clerk to Anthony Farive Cardona, the presiding justice of the Appellate Division 3rd Department. He read the appeals, researched them, drafted. Judges in that building trusted his memory more than their own notes. Beyond the courthouse, he was the man who volunteered before anyone asked. Democratic committeeman, Eucharistic minister at St. Francis Dale in Eldonville. He arranged a program bringing Bethlehem High School students into actual courtrooms to observe actual proceedings. He stood on the deck at swim meets and along the sidelines at soccer games, and he remained standing. He was punctual. Not roughly punctual, but mechanically, unfailingly punctual. He arrived ahead of schedule. He returned calls. In a building packed with lawyers, Peter Porco's absence was a data point. That detail would matter more than anything else during the first 12 hours of this case. His wife was Joan, born Joan Balzano. She was a speech pathologist who worked with children, patient by profession, patient by nature, someone who spent her days coaxing sounds from kids who could not yet produce them. She and Peter had been married about 30 years. Friends portrayed a marriage without theatrics. Together, they had built precisely the life they intended, supported by 2 public service salaries in a school district they had deliberately chosen. The Porcos had 2 sons. Their older son was Jonathan, 23, an officer in the United States Navy, assigned to a nuclear submarine based out of South Carolina, disciplined, straightforward, and 800 meters away at the time. Their younger son was Christopher, 21, studying at the University of Rochester, out at the state's far western end. By November 2004, Peter and Joan Porco had 1 child serving beneath the ocean, and another they were starting to realize they barely knew at all. For 2 years, little things had been going wrong around that home, one after another, without anyone fully understanding what they meant. Laptops disappearing during holiday breaks, a window screen sliced from outside, a camera discovered lying in the front yard as though someone rushing away had dropped it while heading toward the car. Peter had made police reports. He had talked with detectives. He had assisted the Bethlehem Police Department while they investigated 2 burglaries at his own residence. He simply had never asked the obvious question of who kept finding a way inside or why someone kept returning. Christopher Porco was born July 9, 1983. He was raised in that house, in that school district, with the advantages his brother enjoyed. At the University of Rochester, he projected an identity that had little connection to a 2-income household in Del Mar. He told fraternity brothers his grandmother owned much of Fairfield County, Connecticut. He talked about oceanfront property, vacation houses, a family possessing the kind of wealth that never needed explanation. He talked about it constantly, repeating the image of wealth. None of it was real. What was real was the Jeep, a bright yellow Wrangler with oversized tires, a vehicle deliberately chosen because it could be recognized from 3 blocks away. On a campus filled with $20,000 sedans, everybody knew who owned it. Everybody. That detail would eventually place him on the New York State Thruway at 2 in the morning, exactly where investigators would later need to find him. But in 2004, it was simply another prop that made the story convincing. He had swum since high school, competing year-round, and quit Rochester's team. He joined the OTC program and was forced out because of poor grades. He began in biomedical engineering before switching to economics. He worked part-time at a veterinary hospital and told people he planned to attend veterinary school. Beneath the resume, the pattern was more consistent. Christopher Porco took things, then sold them. Thanksgiving break, November 2002. He was home from college. The Porco residence was burglarized. A Macintosh laptop and a Dell laptop were taken. A camera reported missing later appeared in the front yard, dropped. Bethlehem police recorded the report. One responding detective, Christopher Bodish, sat in the living room and documented what the family told him. He would return to that house 2 years later under circumstances entirely different. 20 days following the burglary, one stolen laptop was sold on eBay to a buyer in California. Christopher was the seller. July 2003, another break-in occurred at 36 Brocon, with the machine taken through a window and the screen ripped from outside. That computer also passed through an online listing. Police would go to San Diego to retrieve it. June 2003, the veterinary clinic where he worked was burglarized. A phone, a camera, computers. He was not merely a thief in theory. He was someone who stole from the 3 places that trusted him most: his employer, his parents, and eventually his brother's identity. Roughly a month before the murder, the eBay accounts registered to the Porco household were frozen. Christopher had accepted payment for merchandise he never shipped. Buyers complained. Money disappeared. And since the accounts used the Del Mar address, the complaints reached his brother. His response offered the clearest glimpse into how his mind operated when confronted with consequences. He emailed angry buyers while posing as Jonathan and told them Christopher had died. That explained the absent merchandise and the missing refunds. He turned his own death, delivered in his brother's voice, into a customer service tactic. Jonathan, following a submarine schedule, tried contacting him more than 40 times. Christopher never returned a single call. Then came the problem of school itself. His grades had fallen apart. Following the fall 2003 semester, the University of Rochester ordered him to withdraw. He kept that from his parents. Instead, he enrolled at Hudson Valley Community College in Troy, 20 minutes from his mother's kitchen, and failed there as well. He learned about those grades while traveling through Europe in March of 2004, using money that belonged to someone else. Then he created an answer. He falsified a Hudson Valley transcript showing straight A's and used it to secure readmission to Rochester for the fall of 2004 while on academic probation. When his parents wondered why tuition bills had stopped coming, he claimed the university was paying his expenses. A professor, he said, had lost his final exam, so the school was correcting the mistake. In its own way, it was an effective lie. It explained the absent paperwork, complimented him, and cast the institution as the one at fault. Peter Porco, who made his living reading appellate briefs, believed the story. Beneath everything, though, the numbers were worsening. More than $4,000 in American Express debt, approximately $16,000 owed directly to the University of Rochester, $16,450 in Jeep credit, and a Citibank student loan of roughly $31,000. Much of it used to settle obligations from the prior year, borrowed funds used to repay money already borrowed. CBS News would later place his total exposure at no less than $50,000. He had no earnings capable of covering that amount. He worked part-time at an animal hospital and drove a car beyond his means. Therefore, he required a co-signer possessing clean credit, dependable state income, and 30 years of financial discipline. He had exactly that person. He simply never requested his help. In early autumn 2004, a routine credit review uncovered something that should never have been there. Peter Porco's name appeared on a loan he had never encountered. His signature appeared on the Citibank student loan, about $31,000, as co-signer. He had never signed it. Nobody had asked him. His son had signed Peter's name and submitted it. Peter responded as a lawyer would. He verified the facts, then put them in writing. The email he sent Christopher was unusually direct. Friends later said, unlike his normal manner. He asked plainly if his son had forged his signature as co-signer. He asked exactly what Christopher believed he was doing. He explained that the proper course would have been to call and talk about it. He also told him that he was contacting Citibank that morning to determine precisely what had been done using his name and to remove himself from the obligation. He wanted the matter properly resolved before anything else could be placed against his name or credit ever again. That was day one. On the following day, Peter discovered the second one, $16,450, a credit line for the Jeep. Same approach, same falsified signature. The second email was the one prosecutors would eventually show a jury because it did what the first did not. It moved beyond a father's grievance and became a legal warning. Peter wrote that if his credit were misused again, he would have to file forgery affidavit to disclaim liability. He made clear this also covered the Citibank college loan if Christopher tried to reactivate it or use his father's credit for anything else. He understood exactly what he was describing. A forgery affidavit is not something families exchange. It is a sworn declaration to a lender stating that a signature was falsified. It establishes a written record of a felony, with a named suspect identified by the victim. Peter Porco had built his career around the machinery of criminal justice, and he was telling his 21-year-old son precisely which lever he intended to pull. Yet he ended the email by saying that he and Joan were disappointed, while still loving him and caring about his future. That was the entire contradiction of the message, a warning and an embrace contained in the same words. The defense would later portray the relationship as improving, citing a later email in which Peter observed that the fall semester had been paid and said they could work out the spring arrangements at Thanksgiving. Come home, in other words, and we'll talk. Prosecutors examined the same correspondence and saw a deadline approaching because Thanksgiving was only 10 days away. And Thanksgiving was when everything Christopher had constructed would have to withstand being spoken aloud in a kitchen with his mother there. The falsified transcript, his withdrawal from Rochester, which he had never revealed, the community college where he had failed, the frozen eBay accounts and the buyers he had deceived by saying his own brother was dead. 2 burglaries at that address that had never fully made sense to anyone willing to examine them closely. None of those lies could simply be undone, and now each one was connected to a father who had just written that his next move involved a sworn affidavit. Chief Assistant District Attorney Michael McDermott would later reduce the entire motive to one simple calculation. Alive, he said, the parents were worth roughly $60,000 to their son. Dead, they were worth $1.1 million. That meant life insurance, the house, the estate, the complete framework of a carefully built 30-year marriage transformed into a figure. $60,000 and a felony inquiry, or $1.1 million and a fresh beginning. There is no evidence anyone inside that home understood the calculation was taking place. Peter went to work. Joan went to work. The check later discovered on the kitchen counter written during the final hours of Peter Porco's life while his brain was already deteriorating, was money being sent to his son. Even then, he was still supporting him. Sunday, November 14, 2004, Rochester, New York. The final instant message transmitted from Christopher Porco's computer went out shortly before 10 at night. Then the account fell silent. At approximately 10:30 p.m., a University of Rochester security camera captured a yellow Jeep Wrangler traveling through a campus parking lot. 6 minutes later, a camera fixed to an off-campus medical building recorded the same vehicle traveling east toward the entrance ramps to the New York State Thruway. At roughly 10:45 p.m., a toll collector named John Fallon passed a ticket to a young man driving a yellow Jeep with oversized tires. Rochester to Del Mar is roughly 230 miles, a little more than 3 hours through darkness with almost no traffic. Interstate 90 crosses the state's center, Syracuse, Utica, the Mohawk Valley, a route that in mid-November consists of headlights, salt-stained pavement, and the occasional truck stop glowing orange. The Easy Pass transponder that should have recorded every gantry along that journey produced no reading whatsoever that night. Investigators later discovered it lying loose on the floor of the Jeep. 1:51 a.m., exit 24, Albany. A toll collector recalled a yellow Jeep entering her lane too quickly, operated by a young white man. Exit 24 sits about 9 miles from Broccoli Drive. 15 minutes of surface streets, Delaware Avenue, beyond the strip malls, beyond the high school, into the trees. At approximately 2:14 a.m., the alarm system at 36 Broccoli Drive was disarmed. Not defeated, not circumvented, disarmed using the master code. There was no forced entrance, no shattered glass, no damaged frame, no severed screen. The spare key kept inside the flower pot beside the front step was later discovered resting in the front door lock. Someone entered the way a family member enters. The axe came out of the garage, a firefighter's axe. Heavy head, long handle, a sort of implement that can hang on a wall for years without drawing attention. It belonged to the household. It had been there longer than the man who would soon be killed with it had been law clerk to the presiding justice. Peter and Joan Porco were asleep in their bedroom. The assault was silent only in the sense that nobody nearby heard it. Inside the room, it was not silent. Peter was struck 16 times in the head. The medical examiner documented them. Heavy blows from a sharp instrument, one penetrating the skull, another removing part of his jaw. Trial testimony described injuries so devastating that he was nearly decapitated. Joan was hit 3 times while lying beside him. Her jaw was fractured and dislocated. One eye was destroyed. The blade split open her skull and exposed the brain beneath. There was no effort to make either victim speak. No demand, no questioning, no restraint. 16 blows and 3 blows inflicted on sleeping people, and then it ended. At 4:00 a.m., a neighbor named Marshall Gookie drove by on his way to work. He would testify that he noticed a yellow Jeep parked in the Porco driveway. At approximately 4:54 a.m., telephone company records indicate the outside line to the house had been severed. That timing deserves attention. Roughly 2 hours had elapsed since the alarm was disarmed. 2 hours inside a home with 2 people upstairs bleeding to death. Something within that interval was being organized. The alarm keypad had been smashed. It looked like an effort to wipe away evidence of the disarming. It failed for a mundane reason. The panel that actually stored the data was not the keypad. It was a box downstairs in the basement. It recorded everything. The severed phone line, the valuables left untouched, the carefully staged appearance of the scene. Prosecutors would later tell jurors that each of those decisions was intended to point toward a stranger. Instead, everyone pointed the other way. A stranger would not know the master code. A stranger would not know where the spare key was hidden. A stranger would not arrive empty-handed and use the family's own axe. McDermott's description to the jury was that it was like leaving your wallet at the crime scene. At approximately 5:12 a.m., investigators say the Jeep entered the thruway again, traveling west. By 8:18 a.m., it had passed back through the Henrietta Toll Plaza near Rochester, and cameras around campus captured it traveling toward the university. Upstairs in Del Mar, sometime after the blade struck, Peter Porco got to his feet. His brain had been penetrated in the area responsible for awareness. He did not realize he was wounded. He did not know his wife was dying 12 in a way. What remained was habit. 30 years of the same Monday morning, operating without conscious direction. He walked to the bathroom sink. He turned on the coffee maker. He prepared a lunch. He filled out a check and placed it on the counter. He started loading the dishwasher. He went to the front entrance and stepped outside to collect the newspaper, the door locked behind him. He went to the flower pot, retrieved the spare key, and let himself inside again. Then he collapsed in the foyer. The house documented every step. Blood covered the bathroom fixtures. Blood marked the kitchen. Blood stained the counter, the dishwasher, and the inside of the front door. A trail crossed every room of a man's morning routine, left behind by someone who was already medically gone. Monday, November 15th. At the Appellate Division 3rd Department, Peter Porco failed to appear. That alone was an alarm. He answered his phone. He arrived ahead of schedule. Calls to the residence rang with no answer. The exterior line had been severed at 4:54 that morning. Court Officer Michael Hart was dispatched to check on him. He reached Broccoli Drive around 11. The front door stood slightly ajar. The key remained in the lock. Blood was visible on the front steps. Hart looked inside, saw Peter Porco lying in the foyer, stepped back and called police and paramedics. Responders went upstairs. Joan Porco remained in the bed. She had lain there for more than 7 hours with a skull fracture exposing her brain, and she was still breathing. The axe lay beside her on the floor. Detective Christopher Bodish arrived at 36 Broccoli Drive that morning and recognized the address before he recognized the room. He had visited this same house 2 years earlier while taking a burglary report from a courteous, meticulous lawyer whose laptops had vanished over Thanksgiving break. Now he stood over that man's wife as paramedics worked on her, and there was no way the next few minutes could be clean. Medically, Joan Porco was not expected to survive the ambulance ride. Damage to her jaw had compromised her airway. She could not speak. She could not make one intelligible sound. Whatever information she possessed might leave with her, so Bodish asked questions she could answer by moving her head. Could she hear him? She nodded. Had a family member done this to her? She nodded. Was it Jonathan? She shook her head. No. Was it Christopher? She nodded. Yes. Paramedics working beside him. The crew, including Kevin Robert, Jim Reagan, and Dennis Wood, reported seeing purposeful movement. Someone in that bed was responding. That nod became the most disputed piece of evidence in the case, and it remained disputed for the next 20 years. Here is the argument against it. Joan's neurologist, Dr. Mary Donovey, would later explain that following a basic physical command and understanding a complicated question are different brain functions. A person suffering that degree of traumatic injury can obey straighten your arm while lacking the ability to comprehend. Did your younger son attack you with an axe? The defense argued that Joan might have been reacting to nothing beyond the sound of a familiar name, Christopher. She nodded upon hearing her child's name, the way an injured mother might. There is another problem, and it is the one that has kept this case alive in comment sections and courtrooms ever since. Joan Porco does not remember doing it. She was placed into a medically induced coma. She barely survived and was permanently changed. She lost the eye. She lost part of her skull. Her jaw required reconstruction. And when she emerged, the night of November 14th into the 15th was simply missing, not hazy, absent. In December 2004, she provided videotaped testimony before the grand jury. She did not identify her son. She never has. She later published a letter in the Albany Times-Union asking police to locate Peter's real killer. Christopher learned by phone. He has always maintained that a reporter contacted him first, that he dropped the phone, and that he called Bethlehem police himself. An uncle drove him to Albany Medical Center. According to his own account, he broke down crying beside his mother's bed and dropped to the floor. Others at that hospital witnessed something else. Joe Catalano, a former youth minister who had come to the hospital specifically to offer him comfort, later testified that Christopher's conduct seemed unusual, and when asked if he had seen any grief in the young man, his answer was none at all. Christopher then willingly spent roughly 6 hours speaking with investigators. He denied the allegations over and over, firmly and without hesitation. He told them he could never do something like that, especially not to the parents he loved. He was not taken into custody. He would remain free for nearly a year. He attended his father's funeral at St. Francis Deal in Loudonville, where hundreds from the Albany legal community occupied the pews for a man nearly half of them had worked beside. He stood with them, and when police asked the obvious follow-up about where he had been that night, he offered an alibi that was simple to investigate. He claimed he had fallen asleep on a couch inside a lounge in his dorm. The alibi collapsed first. Fraternity brothers and dorm residents were questioned about that couch in the lounge. His account failed to withstand scrutiny. Nobody could confirm that he had slept there throughout the night. The story meant to account for roughly 10 hours accounted for nothing, but disproving an alibi is not identical to establishing where a suspect actually was. And this was where the Porco investigation turned into a lesson in institutional frustration. Bethlehem was a small suburban department. Terrence Kinland, who would eventually represent Christopher, ridiculed it in open court as an agency mainly occupied with chasing skateboarders away from the convenience store, emphasizing to the jury that this was not the FBI. The department answered that criticism by distributing the investigation to everyone. District Attorney David Source later said the inquiry eventually involved 22 separate police and security agencies nationwide. Detectives traveled to San Diego over a laptop. Investigators collected toll records, campus surveillance footage, telephone company logs, alarm panel information, eBay transaction histories, bank records, and physical evidence. The element that resolves most murder cases stubbornly failed to appear. There was no blood inside the yellow Jeep. None covered the seats. None appeared in the footwells. None was found in the cargo area. No blood was discovered on any piece of Christopher's clothing. There were no fingerprints on the axe. No DNA placed him inside that bedroom. At a scene containing that much blood, with one man hit 16 times in the head, one woman struck 3 times, and a trail extending through every downstairs room, investigators found nothing biological linking the suspect to the house where he had grown up. And naturally, because he had been raised there, even finding his fingerprints on a doorframe would have established only that he had once lived at his own home. That is the unusual difficulty of a family homicide. The suspect's traces are expected to be present. Meanwhile, the defense possessed evidence pointing elsewhere. An unidentified fingerprint was lifted from the telephone junction box in the backyard, inches from the location where the line had been severed at 4:54 that morning. It was not Christopher Porco's. It has never been identified as belonging to anyone. Other possibilities were investigated, and the first was almost suspiciously neat. Peter Porco had a relative, a great-uncle named Frank Porco. Frank Porco was a convicted member of the Bonanno crime family, with a record involving loan sharking and extortion. His nickname, one no defense lawyer could have created without being accused of exaggeration, was Frankie the Fireman. The weapon used in the murder was a fireman's axe. For months, the theory remained in circulation, a message-killing retaliation reaching sideways into a respectable branch of the family, delivered with a recognizable signature. It was exactly the kind of theory a jury would remember. Police investigated it, and it fell apart. Frank Porco was incarcerated, and he was incarcerated because he had refused to cooperate with authorities, which made him almost the opposite of someone an organization would rely upon to deliver threats on its behalf. Nothing connected his world to a law clerk's split level in Del Mar. Then came the courthouse theory. Peter had spent his professional life in family court and appellate work. Custody disputes, neglect proceedings, decisions capable of ruining people. Investigators located a man who had lost a custody matter involving Peter and had reportedly threatened him. They questioned him. He had an alibi. He was eliminated as a suspect. Every credible outsider was investigated and ruled out. What remained was a home entered through a code, stripped of nothing and poorly staged. So the investigation had to be reconstructed from fragments that, individually, appeared to mean almost nothing. At 10:30 that night, a campus security camera captured a yellow Jeep. A Rochester toll collector recalled its oversized tires. A toll collector in Albany remembered a young man entering her lane too quickly at 1:51 a.m. A neighbor heading to work at 4 a.m. noticed a Jeep parked in the driveway. An alarm record showed the master code being entered at 2:14. A telephone line was cut at 4:54. A keypad was smashed, but the wrong component had been destroyed. An Easy Pass transponder was found loose on the floor of a vehicle whose owner had every reason to avoid leaving any digital trace of that highway. And the missing blood, something prosecutors turned into an advantage. Because Christopher worked at a veterinary hospital, his employer, veterinarian John Kearney, explained what that employment actually required: surgical cleanup, disinfection, protocol. A 21-year-old spending shifts sterilizing a room after a procedure was a 21-year-old professionally trained to remove biological material from surfaces. The jury was given 3 explanations for the absent blood. He might have gotten very little on himself. He had hours inside the residence to change clothes, and he knew how to clean. Meanwhile, Del Mar no longer felt like Del Mar. A hamlet where the police blotter once revolved around loitering complaints had absorbed an axe murder without forced entry and without an arrest. Neighbors put in alarms. People began locking doors they had left unlocked for 20 years. And the enduring rumor, the one moving through the Albany courthouse where Peter's chair remained vacant, and through the school district where Joan had worked, was the one nobody wanted to be the first person to voice. The grand jury gathered in late November 2004. The indictment arrived only in November 2005, a full year later, charging a son. The trial could not take place in Albany County. Peter Porco had worked in that courthouse. Every judge on the local bench recused themselves, while coverage across the capital region had been relentless for 2 years. The proceedings were transferred roughly 100 miles south to Orange County, before acting Judge Jeffrey G. Barry. Chief Assistant District Attorney Michael McDermott headed the prosecution with ADA David Rossi. Terrence Kindon and his law partner Lori Shanks represented the defense. Jury selection started in late June 2006. Testimony continued for about 7 weeks and brought in more than 80 witnesses. The forged community college transcripts were excluded. Barry found them too prejudicial. Then Joan Porco testified for the defense. She sat before the jury bearing the visible remains of the attack across her face, the eye, the rebuilt jaw, the missing section of skull, and told them her son had not done this. She spoke about the boy she had raised. She said she remembered nothing from that night, nothing about any nod, and had no faith in the theory the state had spent 2 years constructing. The prosecution did not challenge her. There was no practical way to. Their position was simply that the most severely injured witness in the courtroom was the least dependable on the one issue that mattered. Jonathan Porco testified too. The Times Union characterized his attitude toward his brother as icy and their relationship as strained. On August 10, 2006, jurors started deliberating at 10:25 in the morning. At 4:12 that afternoon, they delivered a note. In under 6 hours, they found him guilty of murder in the second degree and attempted murder in the second degree. Christopher showed no reaction. He later said Lori Shanks had instructed him to keep his expression still. Joan was not present in court. She waited at a hotel in Ghan. Jurors later said they completely disregarded the nod and convicted based on the timeline. On December 12, 2006, Barry handed down the maximum sentence on both counts: 25 years to life for murder, 25 to life for attempted murder, consecutive. It was reported variously as 50 years to life and as 46 years to life under the state's sentencing arithmetic. The judge said he was very afraid that what had occurred during those early morning hours was something capable of happening again. The appeals proceeded through the courts. In March 2010, the appellate division ruled that the nod should never have been admitted. It was not a spontaneous utterance but a response to pointed questions, and nevertheless upheld the conviction as harmless error. The Court of Appeals affirmed in October 2011. The Supreme Court rejected the case in 2012. In 2013, Lifetime broadcast a film about him. From prison, he sued in an effort to stop it. The court ruled for the network. The litigation continued until 2022, when it finally concluded. In January 2023, new lawyers submitted a motion seeking to vacate the conviction, arguing that the prosecution's timeline was not simply mistaken, but physically impossible. That trial counsel had been ineffective, that evidence had not been disclosed, and that a juror should never have served. They also requested mitochondrial DNA testing on material recovered from the alarm keypad. As of 2026, the motion remains undecided. Christopher Porco is incarcerated at Clinton Correctional Facility. He continues to maintain, as he always has, that he was asleep on a couch in Rochester. He becomes eligible for parole in December 2002. The check remained on the counter, written during the final hour of Peter Porco's life by a man whose brain had already been opened, in handwriting that had not yet realized it was dying. Money moving toward his son, just as it had always moved. $60,000 alive, 1.1 million dead. That was the calculation somebody made at a desk in Rochester, and the figure that came back was wrong in every possible sense. Because what it actually bought was a father buried in November, a mother who lost an eye, part of her skull, and the entire night. A brother who stopped speaking to him, 50 years inside a cell 300 meters north of Del Mar, and a woman who continues saying he did not do it, about the only night of her life she cannot remember. An individual with 16 gashes in his head rose from sleep and flipped on the coffee machine. He fixed a meal. He drafted a check and placed it on the counter. He walked outdoors to fetch the daily news, and as the hatch locked behind him, he picked up the extra key out of the flour urn and brought himself back inside the manner he had 100 times previously. Portion of his jaw was missing. The edge had penetrated through skull and into the flesh underneath, into the precise spot that would have alerted him he was passing away. Thus, Peter Porco performed the sole action still open for him, his pattern. And roughly 230 meters toward the west, the party who had committed it was already returning on the expressway, motoring to campus before the dawn broke out. Assist this show expand. Enjoy the clip, drop a note, and sign up for extra stories. This assists us greatly. Appreciate you. Delmar, New York represents a district within the city of Bethlehem, nearly 5 miles south of center Albany. It isn't an area with a profile. Split stories and colonials, full-grown maples, paths featuring basketball rims, a high school residents relocate to the zone for the sort of spot that appears in property flyers as peaceful, settled, family-focused. In 2004, the largest common entry on the Bethlehem Crime Registry was adolescents hanging around near neighborhood shops. 36 Broccoli Drive marked one of those homes, 2 levels, connected garage, a modest entryway porch featuring a flower box nearby it. Peter R. Porco was 52 years of age. This man entered life in Norwalk, Connecticut, born to Jane alongside Ralph Porco. Further, he established a legal path around Albany through steady effort. University at Albany, followed by Albany Law School, then a position many law graduates dodge, public defender deputy servicing Albany County. He transitioned to private work with a central firm, though the labor he mentioned featuring the highest pride remained the least flashy. He functioned as a legal guardian across the 3rd Department, which meant he appeared inside Albany County Family Court and spoke up for kids possessing nobody else within the room, pleading for them. Custody battles, neglect claims, matters in which the parents formed the issue. He ultimately clerked alongside Judge William McDermott, and through 2004 he occupied one among the top-valued non-judicial roles within the state legal structure, law clerk for Anthony V. Cardona. The head magistrate of the Appellate Division 3rd Department, he reviewed the petitions, he evaluated them. He wrote judges inside that courthouse relied on his recall past their own records. Beyond the courtroom, he was the person who helped before somebody inquired Democratic Committeeman Eucharistic Minister over at St. Francis de Sales in Loudonville. He arranged an initiative that guided Bethlehem High School pupils to actual courtrooms to observe genuine trials. He waited along the deck during swim matches and by the sidelines during soccer matches, and he never sat down, plus he remained punctual, hardly roughly prompt, rigidly without fail prompt. He showed up before he was anticipated. He picked up his phone. Inside a complex packed with attorneys, Peter Porco's absence formed a critical signal. That fact will count further than everything else through the initial 12 hours regarding this situation. His spouse was Joan, originally Joan Balzano. She proved a speech therapist who assisted youngsters, calm via career, calm via nature, the individual who spent her mornings drawing words from toddlers who could not yet produce them. She, together with Peter, were wedded around 30 years. Acquaintances depicted a partnership lacking drama. They had constructed the precise existence they intended to construct, using 2 public sector paychecks inside a school sector they selected intentionally. They raised 2 sons. The older was Jonathan, 23, an officer within the United States Navy, posted on a nuclear submarine near South Carolina, structured, straightforward, and 800 miles away. The younger was Christopher, 21, and scholar attending the University of Rochester over near the distant west portion belonging to the state. Around November of 2004, Peter, along with Joan Porco, owned 1 kid deployed beneath the sea, plus 1 child they were starting to realize they failed to comprehend whatsoever. Since across 2 years, modest matters had been turning sideways within that home. Computers that vanished over winter vacations, a window mesh sliced from the exterior, a camera found sitting on the front lawn like someone rushing had lost it en route toward the automobile. Peter had lodged police complaints. He had conferred with investigators. He had cooperated totally with the Bethlehem Police Department through the inquiries of 2 break-ins at his own residence. He had merely never raised the obvious query regarding who kept gaining entry. Christopher Porco was born on July 9, 1983. He grew up inside the same residence within the same school zone, surrounded by the same privileges his sibling possessed. At the University of Rochester, he displayed an image of himself having nothing to do with a 2-paycheck home in Delmar. He told fraternity members that his grandmother possessed much of the acreage across Fairfield County, Connecticut. He cited coastal property, retreat homes, a household holding the sort of wealth that does not need to be brought up repeatedly. None of this was real. What was real remained the Jeep, a bright yellow Wrangler riding oversized rubber, a motor chosen expressly because it could be recognized from 3 blocks distant. Across a campus of $20,000 sedans, everybody understood whose it was. Everybody. That detail will ultimately place him along the New York State Thruway at 2 during the morning, though in 2004, it was merely the feature that sold the narrative. He had been a swimmer since high school, competing year-round, and he left the team at Rochester. He joined the ROTC track and was pushed out over low marks. He began within biomedical engineering, then shifted toward economics. He worked part-time at an animal clinic and informed people he was bound for veterinary college. The habit underneath proved steadier than the resume. Christopher Porco took items and afterward he sold them. Thanksgiving recess, November 2002. He was back from classes. The Porco home was hit. A Macintosh laptop along with a Dell laptop taken. A camera listed missing surfaced later upon the front yard, dropped. Bethlehem officers processed the file. One of the attending detectives, Christopher Bowdish, sat inside that living space and logged what the household shared with him. He would return to that address in 2 years under vastly changed conditions. 20 days following the break-in, one of the stolen laptops was sold on eBay to a purchaser residing in California. The vendor was Christopher. July 2003, a second intrusion at 36 Broccoli Drive. A laptop removed through a window, the wire ripped from the outside. That device likewise passed through an online posting. Authorities would ultimately journey to San Diego to retrieve it. June 2003, the animal practice where he worked was burglarized. A telephone, a camera, computers. He was not a burglar in the abstract. He was a burglar who stole from the 3 spots that trusted him most: his boss, his folks, and eventually his brother's name. Near a month preceding the crime, the eBay profiles linked to the Porco address were locked. Christopher had taken funds for products he never delivered. Buyers protested. Cash went missing. And since the accounts used the Delmar location, the notices arrived at his brother. His reply to that provided the single clearest view into how his thoughts operated. He wrote to the upset buyers posing as Jonathan and told them that Christopher had passed away. That was the reason given for the missing goods along with the missing reimbursements. He used his own passing using his brother's voice as a client service tactic. Jonathan, on a submarine timeline, attempted to contact him over 40 times. Christopher never returned calls once. Next, there was college itself. His marks plummeted. Following the fall 2003 term, the University of Rochester forced him to leave. He failed to inform his folks. He registered instead at Hudson Valley Community College, located in Troy, 20 minutes away from his mother's kitchen, and dropped out there as well. He discovered those scores while journeying across Europe in March of 2004, using funds that were not his own. Then he crafted an answer. He fabricated a Hudson Valley record displaying all A's and utilized it to secure his readmission at Rochester regarding the autumn of 2004 under academic warning. And whenever his parents inquired why the tuition invoices had ceased coming, he clarified that the institution was handling his charges. Since an instructor had mislaid his term test, and the college was fixing the error, it proved in its manner a remarkable trick. It covered the absent records, praised him, and rendered the school the blameworthy side. Peter Porco, a clerk who reviewed appellate documents for a career, accepted it. Beneath all of this, the math was growing uglier. Over $4,000 in American Express balances, around $16,000 due directly toward the University of Rochester, $16,450 in loans drawn to cover the Jeep, and a Citibank college loan near $31,000, a major portion of which cleared off the prior year's debts, funds taken to pay off capital previously taken. CBS News later estimated his overall debt at no less than $50,000. He held no earnings able to match that total. He possessed a part-time position at a veterinary clinic and a ride he could not manage. Thus, he required a guarantor possessing an immaculate financial score, a steady government wage, plus 30 years belonging to fiscal control. He possessed one. He simply never approached him. During the early fall of 2004, a standard background review revealed something that ought not to have been. Peter Porco's name stood on a loan he had never viewed. His signature marked the Citibank college loan, near $31,000, as guarantor. He had never endorsed it. He had never been requested. His child had forged his name and mailed it off. Peter acted as an attorney acts. He verified it, and afterward he recorded it. The email he forwarded to Christopher was direct in a style that companions mentioned was unlike him. He asked outright if his child had forged his signature as guarantor. He inquired what precisely Christopher believed he was doing. He noted the proper step should have involved a telephone call along with a discussion, and he informed him he was reaching Citibank that morning to discover what exactly was done using his identity and to have himself detached from the liability. That marked day one. The following day, Peter discovered the second agreement, $16,450, a line of funding for the Jeep. Identical tactic, identical fake name. And the second message forms the paper the state would ultimately lay before a jury, since it accomplishes something the initial letter omits. It ceases being a parent's grievance and becomes an official notice. Peter stated that if his reputation was misused again, he would be compelled to submit forgery affidavits so as to disown responsibility. He detailed that this applied toward the Citibank student advance as well, should Christopher try to re-enable it or utilize his parents' name to secure whatever else. He recognized what he was outlining. A forgery affidavit is hardly a home paper. It forms a sworn assertion toward a bank that an endorsement is deceptive. It creates a written file of a crime with an identified perpetrator logged by the victim. Peter Porco had spent his career around the machinery of the criminal justice system, and he was telling his 21-year-old son exactly which lever he would pull. And then he closed the email by telling him that he and Joan were disappointed, but that they still loved him and still cared about his future. That is the whole marriage of the thing, a threat and an embrace in the same message. The defense would later argue the relationship was mending, pointing to a subsequent email in which Peter noted the fall semester was paid and said they would sort out the spring at Thanksgiving. Come home, in other words, we'll talk. The prosecution read the same correspondence and saw a countdown because Thanksgiving was 10 days out, and Thanksgiving was when everything Christopher had built would have to survive being said out loud in a kitchen with his mother present. The forged transcript, the withdrawal from Rochester, he had never disclosed. The community college he had failed, the frozen eBay accounts, and the buyers he had told his own brother was dead. 2 burglaries at that address that had never quite made sense to anyone who cared to think about them. Not one of those lies could be walked back, and every one of them was now attached to a father who had just put in writing that his next step involved sworn affidavit. Chief Assistant District Attorney Michael McDermott would eventually reduce the whole motive to a single line of arithmetic. Alive, he said, the parents were worth about $60,000 to their son. Dead, they were worth $1.1 million. That is life insurance, the house, the estate, the entire structure of a careful 30-year marriage converted into a number. $60,000 and a felony investigation, or $1 million and a clean start. There is no evidence anyone in that house knew the calculation was being made. Peter went to work. Joan went to work. The check that was later found on the kitchen counter, written in the last hours of Peter Porco's life while his brain was already failing, was money going out to his son. He was still paying for him even then. Sunday, November 14, 2004, Rochester, New York. The last instant message sent from Christopher Porco's computer went out just before 10 at night. After that, the account went quiet. At approximately 10:30 p.m., a University of Rochester security camera recorded a yellow Jeep Wrangler moving through a campus lot. 6 minutes later, a camera mounted on an off-campus medical building caught the same vehicle heading east toward the entrance ramps of the New York State Thruway. At around 10:45 p.m., a toll collector named John Fallon handed a ticket to a young man in a yellow Jeep with oversized tires. From Rochester to Del Mar is roughly 230 miles, 3 hours, and change in the dark with almost no traffic. Interstate 90 across the middle of the state. Syracuse, Utica, the Mohawk Valley. A corridor that in mid-November is nothing but headlights, salt-stained pavement, and the occasional truck stop glowing orange. The Easy Pass transponder that would have logged every gantry along that route did not register a single reading that night. Investigators later found it lying loose on the floor of the Jeep. 1:51 a.m. Exit 24, Albany. A gate clerk recalled a yellow Jeep approaching her booth too fast, steered by a young white guy. Exit 24 sits around 9 miles away from Broccoli Drive, 15 minutes across Surface Road, Delaware Avenue, past the strip malls, past the high school, into the trees. At roughly 2:14 a.m., the security alarm inside 36 Broccoli Drive was turned off. Not broken, not bypassed, turned off using the master code. There was no forced access, no smashed glass, no pried frame, no sliced screen. The extra key that resided within the flower pot near the front step was later discovered sitting inside the front door lock. Someone entered inside the way relatives walk inside. The hatchet came out of the garage, a fireman's hatchet, heavy head, long handle, the sort of instrument that hangs upon a wall across years without anybody contemplating it. It belonged inside the home. It had remained inside that home longer than the person who was about to die using it had served as law clerk for the presiding magistrate. Peter alongside Joan Porco were resting inside their bedroom. The assault was quiet in the sense that nobody across the community heard anything. It was hardly quiet inside the room. Peter was hit 16 times across the head. The medical coroner tallied them. Heavy strikes using a sharp weapon, one that penetrated through the skull, another that sliced part of his jaw. Court statements described wounds so severe he was almost decapitated. Joan was hit 3 times while she lay next to him. Her jaw was fractured and popped out. One eye was destroyed. The edge split her skull and exposed the brain underneath. There was no effort to force either of them to speak. No request, no questioning, no ropes. 16 strikes alongside 3 strikes dealt against resting individuals, and afterward it ceased. Around 4 a.m., a neighbor named Marshall Gooch drove past on his way toward work. He would state that he saw a yellow Jeep positioned within the Porco driveway. At roughly 4:54 a.m., phone business files reveal the outdoor wire toward the house was severed. That timing is worth considering. Nearly 2 1/2 hours had elapsed since the alarm was turned off. 2 1/2 hours within a home with 2 individuals bleeding to death upstairs. Something during that gap was being staged. The alarm panel was smashed, an effort to wipe the memory belonging to the disarming. It failed over a simple reason. The box that holds the information was not the panel. It was a unit inside the cellar. It saved everything. The severed phone wire, the untouched items, the staged appearance belonging to the room. Lawyers would later maintain that every single one regarding those actions was calculated to mean outsider, and every single one regarding them expressed the reverse. An outsider does not know the main code. An outsider does not know where the extra key is stored. An outsider does not bring nothing and employ the household's own hatchet. McDermott's wording toward the panel was that it matched dropping your wallet upon the crime setting. At roughly 5:12 a.m., detectives maintained the Jeep entered back onto the expressway traveling west. By 8:18 a.m., it was returned past the Henrietta Toll Plaza close to Rochester, and campus area lenses spotted it traveling toward the college. And upstairs in Delmar, at some moment after the edge struck down, Peter Porco stood up. His brain had been punctured within the area that controls awareness. He failed to know he was hurt. He failed to know his partner was dying 12 inches away. What remained was routine. 30 years belonging to the same Monday morning, running without a driver. He walked toward the sink. He started the coffee. He packed a meal. He wrote out a check and placed it on the counter. He started loading the dishwasher. He walked toward the front door and stepped outside for the newspaper. The door locked behind him. He went toward the flower pot, took the spare key, and let himself back inside. Then he collapsed inside the foyer. The home recorded all of it. Blood on the bathroom fixtures, blood inside the kitchen, blood on the counter, on the dishwasher, on the interior of the front door. A trail through every space of a man's morning routine laid down by a person who was already medically gone. Monday, November 15th, the Appellate Division 3rd Department Peter Porco failed to arrive. That alone formed an alarm. He answered his phone. He arrived early. Calls toward the residence rang and went unanswered. The outside line had been cut at 4:54 that morning. Court Officer Michael Hart was sent to check upon him. He reached Broccoli Drive at about 11. The front door was standing ajar. The key was inside the lock. There was blood on the front steps. Hart looked inside and saw Peter Porco lying within the foyer and backed out and called for police alongside paramedics. The responders went upstairs. Joan Porco was still inside the bed. She had been lying there for over 7 hours with a skull fracture that had exposed her brain, and she was breathing. The hatchet was on the floor beside her. Detective Christopher Bowdish arrived at 36 Broccoli Drive that morning and recognized the location before he recognized the room. He had been inside this home 2 years earlier, taking a break-in report from a polite, careful attorney whose computers had vanished over Thanksgiving break. Now he was standing above that man's spouse while paramedics worked upon her, and there was no version belonging to the next few minutes that was going to be clean. The medical reality was that Joan Porco was not expected to survive the ambulance. Her airway was blocked by the damage toward her jaw. She could not speak. She could not utter a single clear sound. Whatever she knew was going to vanish with her. So Bowdish asked her questions she could answer using her head. Could she hear him? She nodded. Had a family member done this toward her? She nodded. Was it Jonathan? She shook her head. No. Was it Christopher? She nodded. Yes, paramedics working beside him. The crew that included Kevin Robert, Jim Reagan, and Dennis Wood reported seeing responsive movement. Someone inside that bed was answering. That nod became the single most contested piece belonging to evidence in the case, and it stayed contested for the next 20 years. Here forms the argument against it. Joan's neurologist, Dr. Mary Dombovy, would later explain that following a simple physical direction and comprehending a complex question are not the same brain function. A person with that degree belonging to traumatic injury can obey straighten your arm while having no capacity to process. Did your younger son attack you using an axe? The defense position was that Joan may have been responding toward nothing more than the sound belonging to a familiar name, Christopher. She nodded when she heard her child's name the way an injured mother might. There forms a second problem, and it is the one that has kept this case active in comment sections and courtrooms ever since. Joan Porco does not remember doing it. She was placed within a medically induced coma. She survived barely and permanently changed. She lost the eye. She lost a section belonging to her skull. Her jaw had to be rebuilt, and when she came out belonging to it, the night of November 14th into the 15th was simply gone, not fuzzy, absent. In December of 2004, she submitted videotaped testimony before the grand jury. She did not accuse her child. She never has. She subsequently published a statement in the Albany Times-Union pleading for police to go locate Peter's true murderer. Christopher was informed via phone. He has continually claimed a journalist reached him first, that he dropped the receiver, and that he phoned Bethlehem police personally. An uncle transported him to Albany Medical Center. By his own retelling, he broke into tears beside his mother's bed and dropped down onto the flooring. Others inside that hospital saw something contrasting. Joe Catalano, a former youth minister who arrived at the hospital expressly to comfort him, later testified that Christopher's conduct struck him as odd, and that when he was asked whether he had noticed sorrow in the young adult, his answer was none at all. Christopher then sat down willingly with detectives for nearly 6 hours. He denied everything continuously and firmly. He told them he would never commit anything like that, not to his parents whom he adored. He was not detained. He would not be detained for almost a year. He attended his father's service at St. Francis de Sales in Loudonville, where hundreds of individuals from the Albany legal circle filled the pews honoring a man half of them had worked alongside. He stood amongst them, and when police posed the obvious follow-up where he had been that evening, he offered them an alibi that was simple to verify. He said he had drifted off on a sofa inside a common room in his dormitory. The alibi failed first. Fraternity brothers and dormitory inhabitants were questioned regarding the sofa inside the common room. The statement did not hold. Nobody could place him sleeping there across the night. The narrative that was meant to cover roughly 10 hours covered nothing. But breaking an alibi is not equivalent to proving where a person was. And this is where the Porco inquiry turned into an exercise in institutional irritation. Bethlehem is a small suburban force. Terrence Kindlon, who would ultimately represent Christopher, mocked it in public court as an organization whose principal duty was driving skateboarders off from the corner shop, adding for the jury's insight that this was not the FBI. The force's reaction toward that critique was to pass the inquiry to everybody. District Attorney David Soares later stated the inquiry ultimately brought in 22 distinct police and security offices across the nation. Detectives flew to San Diego regarding a computer. Investigators extracted ticket records, campus monitoring clips, phone provider logs, alarm box information, eBay sale records, bank statements, and the physical proof, the element that settles most homicide cases, declined to appear. There was no blood inside the yellow Jeep, 0 on the upholstery, 0 inside the floor mats, 0 inside the trunk space. There was no blood upon any piece of Christopher's apparel. There were no fingerprints upon the hatchet. There was no DNA placing him within that bedroom. Inside a scene with that much blood, a man hit 16 times across the head. A woman struck 3 times, a path through every space downstairs. Detectives found 0 biological material, linking the suspect toward the residence he was raised in. And naturally, the detail that he was raised there signified that even had they discovered his prints on a doorframe, it would have shown merely that he had formerly resided at his own location. That forms the unique obstacle regarding a domestic homicide. The suspect's markings are supposed to exist there. Meanwhile, the defense possessed a piece belonging to proof pointing elsewhere. An unknown fingerprint was retrieved off the phone terminal unit within the backyard, inches from where the wire was severed at 4:54 during the morning. It did not belong toward Christopher Porco. It has never been linked toward anybody. The alternate concepts received their turn, and the initial one seemed almost overly clean. Peter Porco possessed a relative, a great-uncle named Frank Porco. Frank Porco proved a convicted associate belonging to the Bonanno crime syndicate, a person possessing a history involving loan sharking alongside racketeering. His nickname, which Zero Defense Counsel could have created without being charged with overreaching, proved Frankie the Fireman. The homicide instrument proved a fireman's hatchet. The idea hung within the air across months. A message slaying, a payback reaching sideways toward a reputable branch belonging to the household, executed using a mark. It formed the sort belonging to theory that a jury would recall. Authorities investigated it and it dissolved. Frank Porco remained inside prison, and he remained inside prison because he had declined to assist law enforcement, which forms near the reverse belonging to a person the syndicate required to dispatch warnings on behalf of. Zero link existed between his sphere alongside a law clerk's split level inside Delmar. Next, there existed the courtroom perspective. Peter had spent his profession within family court alongside appellate tasks, custody fights, neglect disputes, rulings that ruined individuals. Detectives identified a guy who had lost a custody dispute Peter had been connected with and who had allegedly threatened him. He was questioned. He possessed an alibi. He was cleared. Every believable outsider was vetted and removed. What remained was a dwelling that had been unlocked using a code, cleared of nothing, and arranged poorly. Thus, the file was reconstructed using fragments that individually signified nearly nothing. A yellow Jeep captured on a college security lens at 10:30 at night. A toll clerk in Rochester who recalled oversized tires. A gate collector in Albany who recalled a young guy motoring overly fast inside her booth at 1:51 a.m. A resident heading toward work at 4 a.m. who spotted a Jeep inside the driveway. An alarm file displaying a master code keyed at 2:14. A telephone cable cut at 4:54. A broken keypad that had broken the incorrect unit. An easy pass box sitting loose upon the floor of a car whose driver possessed every cause to desire zero electronic trace regarding that road. And a lack of blood that the state converted into a point. Since Christopher labored at an animal clinic, his manager, the veterinarian John Kearney, stated regarding what that position truly entails. Surgical cleansing, sterilization, procedure. A 21-year-old who passed his work hours sanitizing a room following a surgery is a 21-year-old who has been instructed skilled in wiping biological matter off surfaces. 3 reasons were presented toward the panel regarding the absent blood. He could have received very little upon himself. He possessed hours within the home to shift, and he understood how to scrub. Delmar, during the interval, had stopped feeling like Delmar. A district whose police log operated on loitering reports had absorbed a hatchet slaying with 0 forced access and 0 arrest. Neighbors placed alarms. Residents locked entryways they had kept open across 20 years. And the constant rumor, the one that spread inside the Albany courthouse where Peter's desk sat open, and inside the school zone where Joan had labored, was the one nobody wished to prove the first to utter. The grand jury met in late November 2004. The charge failed to arrive until November 2005, an entire year, to accuse a child. The trial could not proceed inside Albany County. Peter Porco had labored within that courthouse. Every magistrate upon the local bench was recused, and the reporting across the main district had proven total across 2 years. The hearings were shifted nearly 100 miles south down into Orange County, before acting Magistrate Jeffrey G. Berry. Chief Assistant District Attorney Michael McDermott directed the prosecution with ADA David Rossi. Terrence Kindlin and his law colleague Lori Shanks defended. Jury selection started in late June 2006. Testimony continued roughly 7 weeks and brought past 80 witnesses. The forged junior college records were kept out. Berry ruled them excessively biased. And then Joan Porco took the seat on behalf of the defense. She sat before the panel with the clear marks belonging to the assault still upon her face, the eye, the rebuilt jaw, the absent portion belonging to skull, and informed them her child failed to commit this. She depicted the child she had nurtured. She stated she held 0 recall regarding that evening, 0 recall regarding any nod, and 0 trust in the concept the government had spent 2 years building. The prosecution failed to cross-examine her. There existed no route to. Their stance was merely that the most injured witness inside the space proved the least dependable one regarding the sole point that counted. Jonathan Porco testified as well. The Times-Union depicted his attitude toward his sibling as cold and their connection as tense. On August 10, 2006, The panel commenced debating at 10:25 during the morning. At 4:12 that afternoon, they issued out a message. Below 6 hours, guilty belonging to murder in the second degree and attempted murder in the second degree. Christopher displayed nothing. He subsequently stated Lori Shanks had instructed him to hold his expression quiet. Joan was absent inside the courtroom. She remained waiting at a lodge in Goshen. Panelists later noted they had pushed the nod away completely and decided upon the schedule. On December 12, 2006, Barry handed down the maximum for each offense: 25 years to life regarding the murder, 25 to life regarding the attempted murder consecutive, stated variously as 50 years to life and as 46 years to life under the state's penalty calculation. The magistrate stated he feared very deeply that what occurred during those early morning hours formed something that might occur once more. The appeals finished their path. In March 2010, the appellate division agreed that the nod ought never to have been allowed. It was not a spontaneous remark, but an answer toward direct probing inquiries, and upheld the ruling, regardless, as harmless error. The Court of Appeals affirmed in October 2011. The Supreme Court rejected the matter in 2012. In 2013, Lifetime broadcast a movie about him. He sued to stop it out of penitentiary. The tribunal sided alongside the network. The legal fight dragged until 2022 when it ultimately concluded. In January 2023, fresh lawyers submitted a petition to overturn the ruling, maintaining the state's schedule was not simply incorrect, but physically impossible. That defense counsel had proven inadequate, that proof had been concealed, and that a panelist should never have been chosen. They likewise requested mitochondrial DNA analysis of matter retrieved off the alarm keypad. As of 2026, that petition has not been resolved. Christopher Porco is confined at Clinton Correctional Facility. He asserts, as he constantly has, that he was sleeping upon a couch in Rochester. He becomes candidate for release in December 2054. The draft remains still upon the counter, drawn during the final hour belonging to Peter Porco's existence by a person whose mind had already been split in penmanship that had not yet realized it was passing away. Cash traveling toward his child, the identical way it had constantly traveled. $60, 0 living, 1.1 million dead. That formed the calculation someone executed upon a workstation in Rochester. And the figure that returned was inaccurate in every manner a figure can prove inaccurate, since what it truly bought was a parent buried during November, a mother who lost one eye, a piece belonging to her skull along with the complete night, a sibling who ceased talking with him, 50 years inside a cage 300 miles north of Delmar, and a female who constantly claims he failed to execute it. Regarding the sole night belonging to her life, she fails to recall. Thanks for watching Crime Chapter 51. If you enjoyed today's cases, let us know in the comments which one stayed with you the most, and tell us where you're watching from. If you love long-form true crime documentaries, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next case.